All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for joining this Neo4j Live GraphRAG for Smarter Medical AI. I'm super happy to have two guests today, Michael and Johannes. Hi, Michael and Johannes. How are you doing? How's it going?
It's going good. Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Having us.
Thank you for joining. This was one of those. One of those. I think you had the unfortunate coincidence at Nodes last year where we had some technical difficulties and we couldn't bring your session online, and we have to reschedule this. We need to catch up with it, and now half a year later, we finally here. I think. Dates and all these things, but new things have happened in the meantime, so I think it's even better probably that we're doing this now. As you told me, that new development and interesting story. So I'm very much looking forward to today's session. As always, this is recorded, so if you want to watch this later on, you can do so. The video link is available. If you have questions, if you have any comments, any feedback during the live event, then obviously I encourage you to join the chat. I already see Andrew, who is from the life science field. He's a biostatistics, works at biostatistics for new drug development. So pretty cool role. And yeah, if you have anything to do with life sciences and with graphs, maybe even let us know. Let us know your experiences. Let us know what you're doing. So that is always interesting. And but yeah, before we do that, maybe and then hear what the audience is doing. Maybe we hear what you two are doing. Johannes, maybe do you want to start and give a short intro to what you are, who you are actually, what you're doing, and maybe also if you can talk a little bit about why you discovered graphs to be a solution for what you're doing.
Yes, thanks a lot. We are both working for Parallel and a full stack AI consulting company, how we call it, like implementing stuff from end to end, so from innovation to maintenance and all the steps in between. So for us, it's important to cover everything from like new developments in the field, new research, apply it in the real world, and also tackle compliance, maintenance, these kind of stuff. So that's why we have a broad field of application. And I'm responsible within Parallel for autonomous AI and compliance. Like it's a nice mixture. So one of the things, of course, we are looking into our agents and memory and this kind of stuff where you can use some graphs. And also the example we brought you today, more about like I wouldn't directly call it compliance, but like explainability, like Andrew wrote it in the chat. Like it's for a lot of real world use cases, it's very important that you can check actually what went into and that you can kind of audit it depending on the field you're in. And so that's why we are interested in this topic. And yeah, I think that's it for me now. And I will hand over to Michael.
Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, for me actually, yeah, I had a nice intro like prepared for notes back then, but it's still valid. It's like graphs. I think they accompany me now for I guess like 10 or more years. When I started doing a postdoc in biology and genetics, studying genetic networks, and then it was really interesting to say, okay, how that links to graph theory and dynamical systems, and then AI, right? And it was also like not just deep learning, right? And then bringing it together. And then I discovered the field of geometric deep learning, again, graphs and topologies and working on this. And yeah, and that still kind of like drives me and fascinates me. And then we got in touch with you guys, Neo4j, when we started working on some interesting projects, and discovered what you guys were doing, and then what you guys were doing, like bringing GenAI and graphs together. And yeah, now we're here. So
yeah, it's very cool, and what you just mentioned, Johannes, and also what Andrew wrote in chat is like this hallucination, this understanding what is happening, what is everybody wants to do or is, I guess, told to do something with AI, and then you realize, okay, we're creating this black box here, and it does something, and sometimes it's right, sometimes it isn't. But when it isn't, then it can be, it's all fun and games when you talk about something that is not really life changing. But if you are in the life sciences or in the healthcare industry, if a patient asks something and then you get the response, okay, you have cancer, you have 2 more weeks to live. I mean, let's say worst case is the outcome, okay. But in the end, it was just a
Yeah.
a vector error, and
Mhm.
you just have a cough. Let's say it's not good. So I think that's a very important thing to make sure that people are and I think this is another thing, especially when it comes to health and life sciences. When I talk to friends or family, I get this, and maybe you can relate. I get these two responses. One is, doctors are so overwhelmed with things that are happening. They get so many patients to treat. There's so much things are happening at the same time. So many new development in research are happening. Nobody can keep up. If an AI bot can look at myself and treat myself and make the decisions, I feel much safer. So this is one extreme. The other extreme is saying, well, I don't want to be in the hands of some AI algorithms that doesn't know me, that can make errors, that has no way of making, explaining to me how it came up with this decision, and then
Yeah.
I get down to some kind of crazy path. So these two extreme, I think, are existing, and I don't know. Do you see the same? Do you see maybe a third?
Yeah, I
Um,
noticed this. Oh, sorry, I didn't
no,
want
no,
to
no,
cut you
no,
off.
no. Go ahead.
I think I see the same, and it's like it's now I think a problem or a topic for the whole society and how we work in the future. Like for some fields, it's of course the impact is much higher. Like a wrong diagnosis could be like life threatening. For others, it's maybe you just lose money or you make a bad decision in life. But also for company, for risk management, for deploying something into production. I mean, maybe we just lose a few hundred millions or whatever if it's wrong. But still, these kind of things are hard, and especially when you see more and more of these examples in social media, or like this totally autonomized companies, social media just producing stuff out there. Basically, the algorithm just creates the video, the context, the marketing material all by itself. We need to have a discussion, I think, on a societal level on how we want to tackle this and what actually needs to be proven that it works and where it comes from, and at the same time leverage these new opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, did you want to say something?
Agree. Yeah, in terms of like another third, in a sense, the reproducibility aspects. Sorry, the reproducibility aspects, in particular of the querying and like we're talking now, RAG, retrieval, in particular the retrieval stages. This is something very interesting, and as you already pointed out, it's okay. How can we create some guidelines or use natural guidelines? And then again with graphs, it can be interesting in terms of being explainable. You can understand, or you can actually really follow what the LM basically, which path it took to come to a decision, and you can make it reproducible. And that was something that really intrigued us as well. It's the necessity that we didn't see before, and then kind of like using these structures to make that happen. For me, that is like a third important aspect.
Yeah, I think that's an important part of it, is that people, patients, but also doctors or researchers, it doesn't really matter. I think everybody needs to be trusting in the process, and that this is valuable, and this is also correct and explainable to them on the different levels, right? I mean, if you're a patient, you don't have the insights into all the jargon and all the specifics, but you still need to understand in your terms, that you understand a thing, and then the researcher and the doctors have another point of view in it. But at least they need to know, okay, this is how it came together, and this is why it came together. And if it's done right, I think particularly an LLM can be a great way of using this. And you can ask it, explain this to me like I'm a 5-year-old, like I'm a PhD stock, or like I'm a 10 researcher for 10 years or something, and it gives you different scope. But it needs to be we need to make sure that the scope is right and that the content that it then outputs is, traceable and contextualized.
And I think it gives us even the advantage now, as you mentioned in the beginning, that we can thrift through way more information and like basically also as a search engine point us to the correct citations, studies, origins, so that we can then go back to what a human did or what we verified that it's right. And if you like apply this in the right way, it can be very beneficial.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. So we I don't know, I think we diverted a little bit, but only slightly. So, but getting us back to the topic. So you two created a tool or a company almost like called Adiu Health. How do you pronounce it correctly? You make this little play on words with adieu, which means goodbye in French. And that's what you developed, and that's a tool that helps doctors. I think that's how I understand it. But maybe you can present it yourself much better. Yeah, maybe you do it.
We have actually we brought a little presentation. So.
Yeah, let's maybe switch to that.
Johannes,
that's even better.
We would hand it over to you to put it in context.
Yes, perfect. I can share. Give me 1 sec. There it is. Just need to share the right one.
Yeah, no problem.
Let me quickly check because here is it sharing the presentation screen or just the?
It looks good.
I think it looks good. I see the presentation.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Then
I can zoom in a little bit more even. Well, not here maybe. In front of your faces. Here we go.
Perfect. So exactly. Just mentioned from the beginning, like we are parallel. We are like the consulting company, and Adiu is one of the products we developed. And because you mentioned this also in the beginning, finding our title here is finding the right solution for a specific problem. So it really depends on the needs, on the specific needs to find the technology that will solve the specific problem. And when we go into like also what you mentioned, there are so many new studies, so many new research papers coming out, and the actual doctors are overwhelmed with patients and documentation, and they don't have the time to focus on this one. They don't even have enough time to focus on their patients. So a lot of physicians are overwhelmed by documentation, and they want to have more time for their patients. So what we did is we said, okay, there needs to be a better way to solve this problem, and AI is making huge progress. And we started with the Adiu as like a tool that can summarize the interaction between the patient and the doctor to save time for the doctor. This is the first step. So reduce the bureaucratic workloads and work hours so that the doctor itself has more time for the patient and for the important things, to really think about the combination of diseases and the patient itself to provide better healthcare. And so we developed this tool that can be used by doctors to just make their life easier. And this was it's just the beginning. So what we want to go into today is more of, okay, how can we use this information and then like add more information to the just what was in the what the doctor already asked and the patient answered, or the description of like their current status. Like as you mentioned, maybe there's a new study came out last week that had some interesting findings for diabetes and gender or age or some other interactions that the doctor was not aware of, because it's really a really rare combination, and to provide more information for the doctor. And so, for example, there are certain guidelines, like medical guidelines, for what's the optimal blood pressure, what's for diabetes, for specific metrics that are like on average what the doctor should, like the target value. And they like it gets complex very quickly. And I would say in most cases, the doctors are aware of the most common ones and what they learned in the during their studies, during their work life, or the last conference. But of course, it's nearly impossible to keep track of everything. And that's just, then you have like the guidelines, but then you have new papers, things change over time. And if you really don't have time to really take care of your patients, how should you have time for checking like new developments and this kind of stuff? And that's what we wanted to tackle. And exactly as you also mentioned in the beginning, you have like, okay, LLM is awesome. Everyone has played around with it and done some stuff and asked questions, but it's if you go to a doctor and say, yeah, I've Googled my symptoms, exactly, thanks. And sometimes it's a really awesome answer, sometimes it's a really bad answer, and it's a black box and you don't know. So it's maybe not the best thing to do. You don't know where it come from. I mean, you explained it on probably multiple podcasts, on your blogs, like all this kind of stuff. So I think a lot of people are aware of, okay, just using the LLM without knowing where the actual information come from is for certain applications not the best idea. And then, of course, you have option number 2. You could just use RAG. You make chunks out of your text. You put it into a vector. And then you ask for my questions, what are the closest vectors? You give back these chunks, put this into the LLM, and let it give an answer. And for a lot of cases, that gives better answers. What we have seen in practice is there are a lot of challenges with this approach. And I think Michael will go way more into detail later, just to basically start on the top and then going deeper later, is maybe the paragraph is embedded into a certain vector that is close in the vector space, but in reality, not really. It could be because you're talking about diabetes, but in a different context. It depends on how you chunk it. It depends on which vectors you use, and there are a lot of stuff. And the interpretation afterwards is also more difficult. So it's, I would say, definitely better for this application than just asking the LLM. And you can also in the end say, okay, we took this chunk of context from this source document and feed it in there. But also documents typically have kind of a structure and then a relationship in between. So just individual chunks are sometimes missing the context. And also you have, like, in the document itself, you have relations. So that in one paragraph, you're explaining in the introduction, you're saying, okay, this is the disease. Then there comes the part about, okay, this was our study, and then the findings. And there's typically you have some kind of connections and relationship between this. And this is also very important. And if you have a lot of documents that are all about diabetes in a certain context, you would expect that the vectors get closer because they are all about medical, they're all about diabetes. And then it depends also on the quality of your vectors, how good the clustering is actually working. And last thing I want to mention is that we have seen, when we've worked on not just the medical, but in a lot of cases, that even though models get better and have longer context, I'm still not convinced that unlimited context will solve all the problems. One is, of course, money. Like, it costs money to have a bigger context window. Then also, if you look, for example, in like Llama 4, which was released, I think, last week or something, and it claims to have a 10 million token context. Not all context is equal. And if you can find the correct context, the right information within the context is also questionable. Some models are better, some are worse. There are these needle in a haystack benchmarks, but it kind of depends on the model, on different stuff. So for us, when we were working on this, one of the important things was to make the context shorter, more precise. The whole idea behind this. So, for example, one concrete example here is like, okay, there was a patient, has a blood pressure of 170 to 180. What should is there some recommendation for the doctor? So all we're doing here is still not a final product, but like kind of a recommendation for the doctor. It shall not replace this. It's not the medical doctor in this is the only information. It's just for the doctor to have like, okay, have a look here. Someone said something else. This guideline is pointing out newest research shows that it should be like this and that. And when you just ask the LLM, put in the transcription and ask the LLM, you get back, okay, it should be below 140. Not bad, but like, where's it coming from? Why 140? Why not 120? Why not 150? Like you have no reference. If you do VectorRAG, then again, it depends on the vectors, some thresholds. If you repeat it multiple times, how exactly you ask the question. And you can check, like, you have two problems. First, you can you find the right paragraph, the right chunk, and you feed it into the LLM, and is the LLM using it in the right way? And because we think that ordering is important within context, how you do it, and how you prepare the context is important, not just finding the information in general. So when you use the VectorRAG here, you sometimes get below 130, I think. It's not like, actually, I'm sorry, in the presentation here, there should be the actual source here. I think it's here. It's a little bit wrong. Here's below 120.
This is
here's
just to
below
keep the
130.
audience awake, I suppose.
Yeah, it's kind of a puzzle game. Please have a look. Where's the number exactly?
It's not in the box.
Are you a human?
We have arbitrary boxes in our slides.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. As you can see here, in this this commentary here, it's below 130 for diabetes patients, and here it's below 120. And then we did multiple experiments whether like the context actually got below 130 and below 120. Sometimes it got just one, sometimes it got both. Even if it got both, the model not always used it in the right way. So these were all problems. And then, of course, we continued with GraphRAG and checked if we could improve on all of this. And we started with the very nice tutorial prepared by you, the Neo4j tutorial on how we could start all this, do the chunking, preparation, put it into the knowledge graph, did some experiments, how we can like use it, write query, how we should structure the database itself. And I think that's actually a very good point to hand over to Michael, because he's way more of an expert than I am.
It's good. No, that is good. I can link to the blog, but also to other learning courses in the end, but also the video documents. Because I just see it, Krish, yes, we're taking questions. So if you have any questions, any comments, and just type them in chat, and if we have some time, we can look at those later on.
Thank you, Johannes, for sharing. I guess. Johannes, you know what? Would you mind if you continue sharing? Because
not at all.
Mac is torturing me again.
You have not accepted this beforehand, so
it seems like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, good.
Give me 1 second again.
Okay.
Great. Yeah, if you
Sorry, it's easier.
okay, if you could go one back.
Yes.
For starters,
Thanks.
yeah, great. Yeah, so indeed that the tutorial by Joscha, you really kicked us off in a sense, and that was basically where we started. And as we go through the next slide, initially it was really like, okay, it was really interesting way to dive in, to take documents here, what you see here in this example. We took some medical guidelines and more or less started by just really representing them in a structured way, right? So, and for those in the audience who haven't seen that yet, what you can see here is basically a representation, sort of like a tree graph-like representation of 4 documents, and the PDF has been parsed, and then basically we can represent individual sections, headers, the document, head node, individual text paragraph chunks that together make up a section. We can represent this really neatly in a graph. We've extended that a bit on this by basically adding links between individual in the individual text chunks, into individual text paragraphs, to indicate succeeding and preceding paragraphs, which is kind of interesting in terms of what Johannes mentioned. We noticed that representing context with correct order really can make a huge difference. And therefore, as we include chunks, and as we wanted to also include neighboring chunks, or from vector queries retrieve multiple chunks, we wanted to put them in the correct order given how they are represented in the documents. That really helped to lay a basis. What I also want to mention on this slide, as you can see, hopefully, is that the 4 documents, though they're all represented as graphs for themselves, they're still disconnected, right? That's like indicated by the arrows. So it's 4 disconnected graphs, and so therefore the question was, maybe we can jump to the next slide, and yeah, this is something I already alluded on, so I think we can skip that. The question was like, okay, how do we proceed from here? And that was very interesting journey, because we basically we thought a little bit about this, and like doing now kind of like a hybrid factor similarity based retrieval combined with these structuring elements. So for example, using vector search to retrieve, based on a query, retrieve some text chunks, and then allowing for multiple hops around in the document to basically also include neighboring text chunks, and present that to the model in the context, basically on what just Johannes just mentioned, allowing for something that might not necessarily be completely semantically similar with the query being stated, but maybe being of interest because it's kind of adjacent in the document and might refer to something, to some different angle or something of interest. So that was the first very interesting journey that already led to an improvement over the traditional vector-based RAG approach. However, it's still what the challenges are. It really, given we're working with entire chunks and then also incorporate adjacent chunks, it kind of like really increased the context size. And as we've already mentioned, this can lead to that needle in the haystack problem. Yeah, where we basically the model would just basically miss something, even though it would be in the context. So, but that was one step. The other extreme, which is really interesting evolution in terms of like creating knowledge graphs, sort of also like being put forward by Microsoft, termed GraphRAG. Microsoft GraphRAG was and is this pipeline in terms of like where we basically start again from these chunks, but then we go over and we embed the chunks, and we basically extract entities and relationships within a given chunk. This can be guided by basically defining what entities are allowed. So, for example, you could define certain disease types or certain other entities, or you could basically have the LLM freely walk through junk, extract certain entities, define certain relationships, even though that obviously can be a bit dangerous and might lead to other challenges. But it really creates a fine, or it can lead to a very fine granular knowledge graph. The downside of that granularity is you have to work through challenges of deduplication. That basically means you need to unify entities that are sort of like similar but spelled differently or something like that. And also an LLM has to work through each chunk individually and extract, and this also might evolve in a lot of cost and effort on that end. And so basically what we finally thought about was like, okay, can we have some sort of complementary third perspective on GraphRAG? And we kind of like termed it tripartite GraphRAG. And we're going to go into in a second in what that means. And the idea was to sort of like find a middle ground here, very application specific, also including the already referenced domain expert knowledge as a guidance to basically do retrieval, not on complete chunks, but basically derive at something that we kind of like current condition specific summaries and lossless information preserving summaries that can create an interesting metagraph structure that can be used. We were able to actually really use it very efficiently for our RAG purposes by basically trying to boost as much information that we target for, while reducing as much noise as we can, like reducing as much of the information that we do not need. And that's something actually I would love to spend a few minutes of our time to really discuss basically and present. Okay, any questions so far? Because I see we're taking.
There were a couple. You just answered one about the sections. So I think about the chunking being basically what Jeff says is a deep table of contents. I think that the other question is maybe we save that for later, so we can continue with the presentation, and then we see how much time we have at the end.
Sounds good. Good. Okay, so what do we mean by tripartite perspective? So basically, you can imagine about in a broader setting about really kind of like three types of entities that we thought out right here. And now, since we're talking about the medical domain, we basically have a set of patient anamneses, individual conditions. And then we have, and this is where domain expertise comes in. This is something that a domain expert can actually pretty loosely define it, but sort of like define condition entities. And what you see here is gender, age, blood pressure, diabetes, lifestyle. So you see actually even instances of diseases out there. This is something that's very interesting. They're still experimenting on this part, but it can be really loosely defined. It creates a finite, if you will, some sort of like a finite set of feature conditions, and they form some sort of an information bottleneck, or where two things come together. And we're going to see that in a second. And then on the right side, this is something that we already basically saw. These are I just picked up the color referencing, the text chunks that are parts of sections, really text of papers, and higher text structures, just indicated here in the coloring, in the orange coloring. This would be the sections where text chunks are assigned to, and then we have the documents themselves here in pink, where sections assigned to. But these are the three groups, anamneses, and we're going to see examples of those in a second. But it's basically, and this was like, as Johannes mentioned in the beginning, for example, what came out of Adiu as a summarization tool. We have an anamnesis, and now what do we do with it? And then we have these condition entities in the text chunks. And now I would love to take you on a journey how we bring those three entities together and how we can make use of them in terms of like really, creating this effective RAG approach. as a graph. Okay, so what you see here on the right is an exemplary text chunk. So right to that would be actually the text that is stored in this node on the right, and what you see in the on the left is blood pressure as a condition entity, right? And now we have a very simple prompt. So that was another experiment that we did. Can we actually really boil it down in terms of prompts, right? Can we really create what we want based on the graph structure, as opposed to writing very, very complicated prompts and if and else elements? And so therefore, this is what we did. A very simple prompt. We basically just asked the LLM to go through each condition entity and through each text chunk, and basically analyze whether within the text chunk the condition is sort of mentioned in some way, and then basically describe this. And now the interesting part is what we do is we create a very simple relationship. Here we just label it mentions, could be anything, but very simple relationship. But the interesting part is that we encode this sort of summary within a description in this relationship. And so what that gives us is kind of like a condition-specific in this case referring to blood pressure, a condition-specific summary of this particular chunk. And this is interesting if you imagine that some of the RAG approaches, they basically, as an initial step, they do document summarization in order to handle the large volumes of chunks. But the point is this summarization sometimes can be pretty unguided, right? So maybe you do a summary, or you allow the LLM to do a summary to cover the most important points, but maybe something that you're looking for later has already been sort of discarded beforehand, right? And this is something we would love to avoid. And therefore, this is a very interesting point. This is why we term it information preserving or lossless compression, sort of the information in the chunk, with particular respect or conditioned on this particular condition here, blood pressure. Good. Johannes, go through the next one. The second interesting point is here we have like a second text chunk coming from a different exemplary document B. Also basically having this condition-specific summary. The second interesting point is that it is sort of very unique and easily expandable. There's not going to be any deduplication efforts to be done. And if you add a new document, it basically creates this new unique relationship between those text chunks of that new document and the particular condition entity, in this particular case, the blood pressure. Right? And so in this very, very, very simple setup, very simple prompt, we kind of like can scale it up, can add more documents, and we create more and more of those condition-specific summaries per text chunk to a condition. And if there's no information in there, right, and then again, the reasoning capabilities or complexity of the LLMs is pretty impressive in that regard, we can actually just have it not at any edge, right? So it creates these edges, but yes, if it doesn't find anything reasonable, it's not going to do it, right? So we're not going to end up with a fully connected something. It's pretty sparse actually, which is also very good. Okay. We also have this type of a kind of like an interesting relationship where basically from a text chunk we can have multiple condition-specific summaries with respect to multiple conditions outgoing. And I'm referencing this here because this is very, very interesting, as it gives us a very natural graphical causal representation of kind of like these comorbidities, because that was one of the questions we wanted to address. Can we have an LLM later easily say, okay, let's analyze comorbidities. For example, what lifestyle changes do you need to take into account given your age or given something? And that is basically already here now encoded within the graph. The cool part is this can be done completely offline, right? So this is something, whenever you have new literature, whenever some domain experts defines new conditions, those entities, he can do so. We can run the system. It just can update itself. And this can be done completely offline. before any patient sort of like is attached to that system. That's something we're going to look at in a second. Yeah, here just another overview over that we're still, just as a reminder, we still have this interesting document structure, right? So basically, as we scale it up, this is kind of like an indication, just an illustration of that scaling up, adding more text chunks towards, or in this case, the lifestyle condition. We adding more of those condition-specific summaries, but we also have a graphical representation of like, okay, for example, the both of those text chunks in the bottom belonging to document C are actually potentially in subsequent order or something, right? So they're in the same section. So we keep this order information. That is very important later. That's some information we don't want to lose. As we use that for our context, as we use these condition-specific summaries, we still want to know in what order they were set in order to bring this into the context later on.
Very
Yes,
cool.
and
Before we move on, there was a question by Jeff and Andrew at the same time, more or less, is about this the mentioning step, or this is in between. Is did you ever think about using ontologies as well to associate? I think the description that you put in mention, or your I think the green notes are your topical notes, where you have, okay, associate them with some medical ontology and say, okay, these highlight words have been mentioned there, so these are the keywords, the key topics, and then the key summary, then the summary goes into them, and then to have some kind of standardizational ontology as a a baseline, or some kind of back end of the terms that are worth becoming a individual node, I guess.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. So in a sense, so what we're presenting here is basically really the bare bone, this tripartite idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it really, and we also, and this is one of the elements where we're basically thinking of how can this be developed from this basis, how we could we introduce include this, and ontologies being one of those elements. So yeah, very interesting, very interesting thought. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, good. Another question? No, I think fine, right?
It's, Jared makes the comment that he's been down this path and used the UMLS. I must admit, I don't know what UMLS is. Maybe it's some ontology in that medical field. And then Andrew said, did you use any particular structure for concept limitations? I think, yeah, we need something. And then he outlines a little graph. So general population to population modifiers to condition modifiers.
No, this is indeed ongoing. Again, on purpose, because we're not even wanted to limit it to the medical domain, right? So this is like this tripartite idea, bringing this together. It is actually something where we really broadened up and thought, okay, this goes beyond different use cases, but in that sense, then integrating different ontologies and methodologies is something we're super interested in doing as well. Yeah, so good point. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what you just see on screen now is basically we adding this left side. So this is the actually what would happen online, or what would happen interactively, is like, okay, cool. Now we have prepared this right side. We're going to see what that actually does for us in a second. But now, okay, it's now let's analyze some anamnesis. And so here we just, as an example, made up sort of example of some hypothetical 60-year-old female patient. And we have like a lot of elements in there that sort of obviously connect to some of the conditions mentioned. And now again, we can define a very simple prompt and sort of like on this side, have the LLM do like, again, a condition-specific anamnesis subset analysis provided some longer and larger anamnesis. And this is sort of like here illustrated. Again, the relationship itself, we termed it has, but could be named anything. Interesting, again, we encode a description. We put the description as a property to the edge link, which again makes it sort of unique. So we have our hypothetical patient, Barbara Schmidt, who should not exist. And basically now we have these connections here to age. And so the anamnesis has been evaluated. And then as a description, the LLM gave us the patient is 60 years old. And then we have a lifestyle evaluation. And here what it gives is the 66-year-old patient does not smoke and does not drink alcohol, takes 30-minute walks twice a week, and does light exercise once a week. So this is basically now we have it fully connected. We have patients sort of connected to these conditions, and we have our text chunks connected. And now to the question, what can we do with it? Here basically is an additional example. So we can connect more than one patient, and it actually gets interesting. And this is also some ongoing work. It's sort of kind of like almost resembles some sort of recommender system setup, but it's really it's really interesting to basically scale both sides. Yeah, just as an example here. And now what we can do is the following. So by the way, oh yeah, just for completeness, Peter Miller, he was added, and just I just added here one link to lifestyle, and he was like the 54-year-old patient is a heavy smoker, overweight, and never exercises. So kind of like
Bad example.
Example, yeah, sure. I want to explain vector similarity, so I have to. Yeah. Anyway, so okay, and now what we can do. And this is very interesting. This actually sort of like resembles some sort of graph transform, where we transform a graph, sort of like nodes and edges of a graph. You can imagine it like that. What we can do is we can now take the information that is encoded in the edges between our patient, our anamnesis in the condition, and each chunk and the condition. We can create embeddings of both of those descriptions, and then we can very easily create a similarity. So, for example, cosine similarity. Yeah, and now, yeah, can go to the next slide. What that does for us, it's sort of like we can create for each condition, sort of like you can imagine like some sort of a matrix, where we basically for each pair of those links between a patient and a condition and between a chunk and a condition, we create in this manner, we create a similarity score. Yeah, and here's just a few examples, highlighting some of the examples where actually, oh wait, no, you're
sorry, I'm too fast. I'm sorry.
A little bit too fast. It put so much effort into these manual animations.
I'm very sorry.
Anyways, no, but I guess you get the idea, right? So the idea is very interesting, because what we do not assume that basically from each patient to each of the text chunks, the information, the vector similarity is going to be equal or particularly high or low. But the interesting part is, as we center it per condition, we create a distribution. We can create, if you can imagine, if we would scale this up, and this is basically where Johannes was going. Now here we have 6 values for these pairs, for these 6 pairs. But you can imagine if we add more text chunks that are then basically where we have these condition-specific summaries towards the lifestyle condition, and if we would add more patients, we would really build up some nice, and we did some tests on that already. We really nicely create specific distributions per condition for those vector similarity scores. And that is super interesting, because we have like really boiled it down. The analysis, and Johannes mentioned that in the beginning, what is really a problem is, okay, you base so much on vector similarity, you return top K, whatever, but it can just unequal chunk sizes or whatever can really break down this approach. And still, the whole thing in this case is built around medical domains. So we do not necessarily expect our vector similarities to be contrary or something. There's like really nuances where you basically need to set thresholds and need to make decisions. And therefore, this is really, really interesting to say, okay, we create around the condition that we're interested in, that a patient has something to analyze. We create an individual distribution of vector similarities. And what we can do with this is actually we can repeat this now. We could repeat this for H. So Johannes, I think you can take the next one. Yeah. This is just an illustration. I mean, you see there's just one connection here, so there would be only a single vector score. But again, imagine scaling this up. You get a second distribution. And now what we can do, we can use a little bit of statistics. And this is something we're also considering doing, this learning-based. A very simple approach could be, and this is one that we just tested for these examples, and the example I show at the end, basically by using some reasonable cutoff to this distribution. And as I basically walk through an anamnesis of a patient, I take on the right side, I take all those descriptions that are, when matched to the patient, are higher or equal to the condition-specific distribution threshold. And this is now really the interesting sauce here, that we do not have one cutoff, one vector similarity source cutoff, one fits all. No, we have per condition, we automatically, or there's an automation going on that creates those condition-specific thresholds that are used. And now we can really extract the knowledge, and we can really create, and there's an ordered prompt being created where per condition and corresponding sources, order retaining, again, because we have these via the graph, we know which chunks were in what order, and therefore we know which condition-specific summaries are in what order. We can bring them together, bring them close proximity, remove all the rest of the chunks that are irrelevant, and really bring it together. There's one final extension that is kind of like implementation, sort of like based on the idea of Markov blanket, or is in machine learning is kind of like sort of related to Markov random fields, Ising models, or graph neural networks, and maybe we could think of it as such, but Markov random fields is actually more appropriate. That is the following: that basically the algorithm has one additional lever, and that is we can make use, for example, given the example here in the top text chunk, document A, you see basically there's this outgoing to condition age and to condition lifestyle. There's like these two condition-specific summaries. And now what the algorithm can do is basically it can bypass the first threshold. What does that mean? It can make, because given this idea that we want to be able to analyze comorbidities and therefore chunks that have more, that work with more than one condition, and put this in perspective is very interesting. So what we do is, as we, for example, given that for example, this relationship to age from this text chunk, document A, is very strong with the patient, has a high vector similarity score, is of high relevance, is anyways going to make the cut, is above the threshold, is taken. Now, for example, for this patient, the second outgoing towards lifestyle reference was below the cut, below its cut of lifestyle was too weak. So what happens is, as the first one is taken, and we see that text chunk has something else that could be of value. In this case, it lifts it. The strong first indicator lifts the second one, and basically it's collected as well, even though the threshold was lower. And that is basically learned by using a second threshold that can be learned to say, okay, to what extent do we allow for not as strong additional references to be also included, right? So again, really interesting learning mechanisms that one can apply here. Going back to the idea of Markov random fields, or classifier that basically have interacting elements coming in. Graph neural networks sort of like function like that as well. and basically boosting the classification requirements, or in this case, retrieval. Yeah. Okay, so, and then basically now, as I promised, final example again. Actually, it's fun. I mean, we should have given it to Dominic. We have a super strong computer vision department, and computer vision scientists. Yeah, seriously. So you could have solved that for us. That was on me. I just okay, PowerPoint. Yeah. Anyways, so you see, interestingly, right? So option 3, GraphRAG, in this particular case, are what we kind of like termed tripartite GraphRAG. The idea, it gives us, in this case, it gave us what we wanted, right? So very simple prompt, was like really just discuss that, take this input, take the report, and then create some sort of report automatically. And here's just the first section referring to this blood pressure. And it really nicely put this in perspective. And the cool part is, in our experiments, and this, like as you see in option 2, it was really interesting to see, in the traditional vector RAG, depending on distance, order, context lens, in about 80% of experiments, it was only one or the other, and couldn't really tell which one it was. And sometimes both were in the context even, or sometimes not. But in particular, when it was both, it was interesting. We really could see this needle and haystack problem in action. And here, with this digestion of unnecessary information, we could really see this come together, and then have the LLM actually do this. And as you can see in this example, it really did this analysis in the context, and that was like the comorbidity analysis in the context. Like, for example, what other factors did we have there? The gender, female, age, and we see this, like, it emphasizes really hypertension in women over the age of 65, and then it comes and brings down these like different different references to the literature. With respect to, this one says like below 120, and this one says below 130, and then makes this reference to her values. Okay, we need to do something. So really this maybe under the term of like what you typically have, like the researcher approach, right? Say, okay, take literature and then compare it. And one of the things we want to do here was like basically do that without needing to refer to some agentic framework, but in a simple prompt, but providing a clean graph, a clean basis that really feeds into a competent LLM being able to handle the rest. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting. We have a couple of questions, so maybe we'll spend a bit of time on that. So just first of all, Georgia, yes, there will be recording, so you can watch this video afterwards at any time on YouTube. So just go to our YouTube channel and you'll find it there. Jared made an interesting comment on the UMLS and the ontology bit, where there was a bit of a question. And Jared says they use a constrained UMLS to use ICD-10 and SNOMED, so some standardized medicine or medical coding structure. I use that for indexing and as a working diagnosis, which limits concept reasonably well. So I guess you don't want to overwhelm, and you don't want to go too finely granular and have too many concepts, but you get the concepts and you have them. Okay, these are coding. There's the ontology description here. Here it works together. So I think that's what they are using. Do you have comments on that?
I think in sorry.
No, it's good.
No, I think, as Michael mentioned, so the example is from the medical field, but the application is like broader.
Yeah.
And the good thing is you can choose whatever ontology fits for you. Like, I think you just have to like keep it in a like if you already have one, you can just apply it, and that's the nice thing. So you don't have to tackle deduplication too much, and you limit the scope. At the same time, of course, you have to involve domain expert beforehand and come up with an ontology. But then you can use whatever you think is appropriate for your use case.
No, makes a lot of sense. Cool. Yeah, but that's great. Thank you for the comments, Jared, and on that. I think that's always an interesting point. I mean, I'm doing these regular sessions with my colleague Jesus on a podcast series called Going Meta, and we usually talk about, okay, what can we do to make knowledge graphs part of an application. And oftentimes we try to combine it with ontologies because it gives you a nice structure. It is a good defined structure that you can use, and it's standardized, so that helps a lot to identify, especially when you work with unstructured data. I mean, you in your example as well. I mean, you upload or you import a research paper, research findings, some discussions, some maybe transcripts of a presentation at a conference or something. You add all these in, and then it's all very, very unstructured. It's not very defined, and it's not like a table of findings. So these become quickly confused, and so it's very good to have a strong defined structure that helps entity recognition, entity association, and you find, okay, these are the concepts, these are the points, and this is how it works together. And so that it doesn't go all over the place.
Yeah.
Cool. There's another question, I think, more of how you set it up. From Tene. Tene asks, why was age a separate entity instead of an attribute of the patient?
Yeah, actually, the idea here was more like to have this as a like a separate condition entity, because it connects multiple patients, and on the one side again, and on the other side we have from our chunks, and that allows us to create this matrix that I showed, to create to create this background distribution for particular entities. That's why it basically was pulled out, if you will, like the others as well, so we can really nicely connect that.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. But I mean, you would probably have both in the end. You have probably your patient, which has like all the data. It's like, okay, the Barbara Schmidt lives in whatever Berlin, is 65 years old, is all this information are probably connected to her individual record of the patient, but
of course,
but age as a concept in your
exactly.
case makes sense.
Exactly.
Be a
And here we all only show, and that's actually that's a nice transition that you're making there. Of course, if this question was in this regard, yes, definitely. Because here we only show like one anamnesis, right? But this patient is like unique itself, but he or she might have like different anamneses that we can work with. So that's another like, yes. And then it's more like a concept in that sense.
Yeah. Makes sense. Because like you said, you analyze everything that is mentioned in these documents, in the individual chunks, and some of these refer to age. Obviously,
Exactly.
then it makes a connection to age as a concept, and obviously a patient has an age as well. So that's I think a good way to establish that and to find, okay, it's there.
I mean, just as one other thought, right? As we show like the different patient, the interesting part, and that's why I mentioned like it kind of like, for me, it sort of like smells a bit like also it's in kind of in line, or maybe aligned with some of the ideas of recommender system, because we can also like have the LLM then analyze, okay, as we connect multiple patients to a concept or to multiple concepts, we can not just have it analyze with respect to different, and what do different guidelines say, or what different literature say, but also like what have we already seen in different patients with respect to what different, right? So that is really interesting. You can analyze a patient given from these two aspects, and here you can generalize, right? So you could replace your patients with users or consumers or something, and then the literature, and then your concepts. What would your concepts be? Right. And that's also for us, that's this interesting where it goes into use cases. What are use cases where we see these same potential, or where that we can build up as these tripartite graph type things that we can address in that manner? That for us would also, or for me, would be super interesting to see what concepts are there. Right.
Yeah. Very cool. Very, very interesting. Very very, very cool approach, and an interesting solution. So I hope this gets developed further, and I hope this gets put in hands of doctors, as soon as possible. So then it helps them in their daily lives. Just thinking back to this picture, the comic picture you showed earlier, where the patient with the you know the little tubular thing walks by, and the doctor has a coffee in his veins. So I think it's that's I don't you don't want that. You want to sit in a in a doctor's office, and you feel like, okay, he or she is up to to strength, and is ready for you, and not like, oh God, where's the next cup of coffee? I'm falling over otherwise.
Definitely. We also try to apply it for ourselves. Like the concept could also be AI research, computer science research, like keeping up with all the research that's coming up.
Totally. Yeah.
And so that's our daily problem. Like there's so many new approaches, prompting techniques, models, benchmarks, whatever. Like doing your daily work and keeping up with the new things that come out is really hard also for us. And like then we can like applying this one to kind of have a filtering process for us to find the important new stuff without getting overwhelmed by just, I think in this context we are quite similar to an LLM. Like too much context is just overwhelming. Like we cannot process it anymore. It's just too much. And so boiling it down, and I think that's why also this is the nice thing is we try to reduce the context to have the summaries very precise to one topic, and then filter for these specific questions we have and find basically the interesting nuggets.
Cool. That definitely is a good word to close the session today. So again, thank you very much to Michael and Johannes for joining us today about this interesting topic and the nice discussion. Thank you all for watching. Before I let you go, the next sessions on Monday, Michael will take another look at Discover Neo4j AuraDB, where he features new or looks at new features on AuraDB and what's available there. And on Wednesday, the 16th of April, I'm being joined by Amy Hodler from the Graph Geeks community, and we will discuss advancing GraphRAG text, images, and audio for multimodal intelligence. So we look a little bit besides pure text, but we'll go a little bit more into these other things that are also available to analyze and to put in your into your data. What to do next in terms of Neo4j Graph database. So you check out the Graph Academy, try Aura free if you want to get ahead of the game and try something Graph without installing anything. And if you want to know more, if you're interested in what's up in the community, check out our community and developer pages as well. And again, thank you very much, Michael, Johannes, for this interesting presentation. I'm happy that it worked out finally. It was really cool. And see you soon around somewhere. And until next time.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.